I have to be somewhere at 3 too, so. Okay, guys, let's get started. We've got a visitor from the Budget and Tax Committee, Erica Schisler, and she's going to walk us through. She's on a tight timeline. We have her for 20 minutes, and she has got to go back to B&T, and she's going to walk us through. Now, you've got this, everybody's got the chart, and if you look at the chart, it's split between the fiscal provisions of the bill that is in our possession, and then after that, you'll see on page 2, policy provisions, of which there, by my count, maybe 15 policy calls. So Eric is here to walk us through the fiscal provisions that were made in B&T. And Erica, why don't you go at it, and then we'll take questions. And then after Erica leaves, we'll go through the amendments. Well, we'll get that next. So let's start with you, Eric, on the fiscal adjustments that are made.
Okay.
And by the way, you can see there's the governor's original proposal in one column. And then you've got the House amendments in column 2, and then Senate amendments in column 3 that the Budget and Tax Committee put on there. So that's sort of how it's laid out. Okay, Erica?
And
Before we start,
Yes.
just a quick question. It's got page references. Is that to the packet, to the original bill? What is that referring to?
if you look at, under the governor's column, it's to the actual bill itself. Under the House amendments, it's to the House bill as it was passed on third reader. And then for the column 3, these go to the budget and tax reprint, which I sent to every member of the committee shortly before this meeting. But Erica is going to take you through, there's in your packet, it says B&T amendments at the top. It's going to be easier for you to see these in that document. So take a look with that and she'll walk you through. It says B&T at the top. And it says technical with the First Amendment there. That's the document.
Okay, Erica, the floor is yours.
It's
Yeah,
complicated.
it is complicated. Floor is yours.
Lots of moving pieces. Thank you. So if everyone has this amendment before you. As the chair stated, Budget and Tax just dealt with funding. First Amendment is technical, as it always is. The second one, as you know, the bill came in from the governor's office where the monetary impact came primarily from collaborative time. And by pacing that to actually what the governor's bill did is it started collaborative time 4 years later than what was originally planned. And therefore that had an impact on the per pupil foundation amount because the cost of collaborative time was built into that. So when you pause or when you delay the implementation of it, funding needed to be reduced out of the foundation per pupil amount in order to accomplish that. So what Budget and Tax did is they agreed with the governor's proposal of delaying that for 4 years. However, what the governor's bill did is because it's the per pupil foundation amount, as you all know, that flows through to about 7 or 8 other formulas that happen, and so it would have resulted in reduction in some of those other formulas. Budget and Tax decided to hold those formulas harmless, i.e. they would still get their increases as contemplated by the original Blueprint Act, and those were the compensatory education formula, the English learner formula, and the special education formula. Now, the governor's bill came in holding special education harmless, so it's agreeing with the governor there. However, in the final year of that for fiscal 33, it was just a technical correction to a dollar value that Budget and Tax made for that. The other programs, monetary things, if you turn to page 4 of the amendment, the BRFA, as introduced, dealt with the Consortium of Coordinated Community Supports. And you can see there that the mandatory funding for that was scaling up through to $130 million in fiscal 26. The BRFA, as introduced, brought that down to a $40 million amount in 26 and beyond. Budget Tax moved that provision into this bill because it was related to the original blueprint. And instead decided to fund it at $70 million, so less than current law, but more than the governor's proposal, and then at $100 million thereafter. The other hold harmless provisions that would have been impacted by the foundation amount changes were the school for the deaf, school for the blind, and the seed school. So the committee decided to hold those harmless as well. On page 7, amendment number 5, this has to do with the concentration of poverty. You'll recall from the hearing that the governor's bill paused schools coming into that program and receiving slated increases for that program for 2 years. The committee decided to strike that provision. There is no freeze on community schools, concentration of poverty grants. That will continue as originally adopted in the blueprint itself. Finally, Amendment 6 is a few pages long. This deals with 3 potential scenarios of an economic downturn. One for general funds, one for federal funds, and then one is combined. So the first one is actually a contingency. Page 7 of the amendments.
Yeah.
You there? Okay. So the first one is actually codifying. When the blueprint was first adopted, there was an economic downturn contingency in that. It was in uncodified provisions. The committee decided to codify it because it lasts forever. So moving that into actual code would be useful. And that is for a general fund downturn, as measured by the Board of Revenue Estimates. There are some modifications to this, however, from how it was adopted when the blueprint first passed. This would say that if there is a decline of 3.75% in the general fund estimate from December, so when we reach December, if the estimate goes down 3.75% from what was estimated in March, then per pupil formula increases and any additional funding would be limited to 0 growth. Under the blueprint bill, it was originally 7.5% decline, and it would have been limited to inflation. To clarify, however, because of this timing, it clarifies that, so if it's December, you see that there is a decline. It doesn't actually require cuts mid-year. What it does, it just impacts the budget bill that needs to be introduced that session, so that you guys, still have a look at it and things like that. So for the federal funds, same thing, same exact mechanism, also 3.75%. That one, because the BRE does not deal with federal funds, that contingency would be satisfied upon certification by the Secretary of DBM. The last one is combined. I actually restructured this morning just for clarity, but it does the exact same thing. It'll just look a little different. This is for combined. So if general funds and federal funds together, when taken together, go down by 5%, the same 0% increases in the budget bill the following January. Those are the amendments.
So these are the fiscal amendments that Budget and Tax put on the bill. So questions for Erica. Senator Hester.
Understand what, with the Senate amendments, what the county by county allocation turns out to be, and how we can understand the impact of it?
Right, so we don't update fiscal notes based on an amendment. The original bill, because by virtue of decreasing the foundation per pupil amount, certain counties will see a decrease in what they are required to do. And it will be not as, because this bill is basically a midpoint in reductions between what the governor introduced and what the budget and tax plan is. Obviously, the fiscal note would still show some savings for some of the counties, but not as much as what's in the current fiscal note.
The graphic gives them a little bit of
Sure. I think some other things are handed out to you. First of all, there's a line chart. I just use that as a visual representation. The top line on that chart, if you all have found it. Yep. So what that line chart is, there are assumptions in it, right? So don't get wedded to at least the bottom line. The top line represents the blueprint. This is just the per pupil value that feeds into the foundation program funding formula. It is not everything, right? So that's a big caveat. But because that's the starting point of everything, this works as a visual. The blueprint, the top line shows you where the blueprint bill would have been. The bottom line shows you there's several assumptions in these numbers, but prior to the blueprint, where that foundation per pupil amount would have been had you not done the blueprint bill. The middle line is where this plan takes you.
Okay, additional questions? We're just purely on the fiscal amendments, Mary. We haven't talked any policy issues, et cetera. It's just the budget and tax amendments that are fiscal in nature. And if you go in that orange packet, you'll see several things, including a chart and all kinds of different good stuff. Yeah, Senator Simonaire, and then we'll go to Senator Carrozza.
So just looking at this chart,
Which chart? That
Your
chart, thank
graphic.
you. Yep.
just quick glance at it, it looks like we're slowing spending now. And then by fiscal 2037, we've almost caught up. So that means we're slowing now, but then we're going to actually accelerate more than we would have.
That's at the virtue, not more than we would have, right? Because you would compare that to the top line, and that middle line doesn't go above the top line.
Well, I mean, percentage-wise.
Okay,
the
so
growth.
what's happening there is because the collaborative time, it's effectively delayed by 4 years, but it's still happening, just later. So if you take, that was an 8-year phase-in of the cost of collaborative time, that's just happening 4 years later. So yes, that explains the curve back upwards, because that's when you get back to effectively what the current plan would have been, but just 4 years later.
Okay. All right.
Okay, we'll go Senator Carrozza, and then we'll come back down to Senator Washington, and then Hester. Senator Carrozza?
Thank you. I was trying to understand the community schools in both what the House did and the Senate did, because I was understanding that by putting a certain number as opposed to a percentage, that would disproportionately affect the smaller counties.
I believe that's not something, that's not in the area of what budget and tax took up. The only part that budget and tax took up with regard to community schools is the freeze for eligibility for 2 years. That is no longer happening under the budget and tax amendments.
So then can you walk me, can you just walk through the change with the House, or what the governor had, what the House had, and what we did on the community schools then, just?
Well, so in terms of funding, this version agrees with the House version. But I believe all the other provisions you're talking about are things that your committee will be taking up.
So.
Yeah, just to clarify, B&T only took a vote on the fiscal
okay.
stuff. And if you look at the chart that Stacy put together, it delineates between the fiscal revisions that, and they did not take votes on any of the policy calls, which.
So in essence, with community schools, the governor had a proposal that the House did not accept, and the Senate did not accept either. Is that correct? Okay.
Go down the line, Senator Hester, then Senator Washington.
Quick clarification, Mr. Chair. So on this graph, Erica, where it says SB 429 PPFA, is that as introduced, as passed by the House, or as amended by the Senate?
That is strictly as introduced.
Do you know what it would look
Sorry,
like?
actually, let me clarify. Yeah, the blueprint is current law, so that's the top line. I don't have that for the House.
Okay. But where would we suspect the Senate bill as amended to be?
The very middle line represents the Senate bill.
Oh, I thought you just said it was as introduced.
It happens to be the same because you get your savings from the per pupil foundation amount is impacted because of the collaboration time. Because the Senate bill, because B&T is agreeing with the governor on the collaboration time, it is the same line.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Senator Washington.
Thank you. This is, of course, an intersection of the budget language and the Senate policy language, so thank you so much for being here and helping us with this. The per pupil foundation funding. Okay. So there was a link, or was there a link to the per pupil foundation amount, the amount that every student gets? Is that still linked to the pause in collaborative time?
Yes.
Right. When did that link happen? In other words, from a formula perspective.
Well,
Is
it
that
was-
a part of this bill?
No, it's always been there since the blueprint was passed. It was how the Kerwin Commission designed the per pupil foundation amount by understanding that collaborative time was going to be part of it. And that collaborative time was something that all students would benefit from. The choice was made to include the cost of collaborative time in the per pupil foundation amount.
Is where, so since that was done in the, in the amendments to our education code done under the blueprint, where would the unlinking of those two things occur?
So it occurs with all of these line items, dollar values. And if you calculate the difference between them, you'll see the difference is collaborative time.
Right. So if one were to just have a per pupil funding amount, just as a function of what it costs about to educate a child without any additional, how would that occur? Would it just be to subtract the collaboration time or to add
So
it back in, or?
The governor's bill as introduced, right, so it's not part of this amendment, but it's in the bill copy. As introduced, the per pupil foundation amount, if you compare it, which the comparison is in it, I've got a copy of your.
No, I
preprint.
definitely understand. So it's on, basically on page 5 and page 3 of the
Yep.
original bill, of the original Senate bill.
Yep,
And when you just subtract the amount estimated, the amount cost of the collaborative time, that was deducted from the per pupil formula, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So under the original
I want to remind everybody, Mary, you didn't get the, Eric has to leave in about 5 minutes here to go back to B&T, so I see some other lights on, so I just want to just put that out there, but you can.
Well, I guess it'd like
yeah.
an opportunity for us to, it could be a subset or whatever, to really understand the links between policy decisions and the fiscal decisions. So if there are some policy decisions that we think are really important to maintain, for example, that the foundation formula should be untouched, how we might do that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Here, let's go to somebody who hadn't asked a question yet, Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Erica, thanks for your time and your expertise on all of this. Could you just give us the idea of, you were talking about if there was a downturn in federal and state, with all the craziness happening in Washington, can you talk about, did you do a best case, worst case, most likely case scenario? And as we are talking about the dismantling of the Department of Education, blah, 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 can you just give us a sense of what we might be looking at?
so the only discussion, the first contingency is based on general fund revenue estimates, right? So when we looked at, the committee evaluated last 20-year history of changes, and the 3.75, so half of what was current law, has occurred twice, and that was during the Great Recession. They also looked at the dollar value associated with each of those. So for general funds, the 3.75% equates to $850 million. So that's the decline that would need to occur. In today's dollars, obviously, when we get 10 years from now, who knows what that would be. The federal fund, 3.75, obviously, there's no history on that. That's a new kind of contingency. We haven't done that before. That equates to about $700 million in federal funds. And then the combined of 5%, that equates to $1.2 billion. That's the angle at which the committee evaluated those.
And when we're looking at these lines, is 1.2 billion?
So a reminder, that chart is only the per pupil dollar amount.
Thank you. Okay. So when we look at, when you had the combined, on page 9 of 10, 5-211.1, combined downturn.
Yep.
That's where we're looking?
Well, that's the combined downturn, so that's the 5% and the $1.2 billion.
Right. And it does anticipate the worst-case scenario? Or it gives
Well,
flexibility
The
for worst case?
result, if that contingency were to happen, then the per pupil foundation amount increases would result to 0. That's not in the chart.
Right. Okay.
Okay, guys, we're going to have to make this quick. 2 questions on the table. Here, Senator Simon-Aron, and then Senator Carrozza, you'll have the last word, and then we got to send Erica back upstairs.
Real quick, just trying to get a high level. So I see the FY '26 and I see the FY '37. It almost catches up. How much less are we spending in that time than originally presented by the
Right,
blueprint?
so there's another handout on your desk that shows a chart. So it's an Excel spreadsheet, 2 pages. The first page shows as introduced, so that was what the governor's bill, had it not been amended, would have done in terms of reductions. A reminder that the governor's bill did not have the coordinated community supports in it. This bill does, so we added that to the line. And then the next chart, pardon me, is the budget and tax numbers. So it basically lands in the middle in terms of overall reductions.
I love charts and all, but just for an overall, from 26 to 37, I see we're spending less money.
Correct.
How much less are we spending?
So in 26, when
If we
you're,
went with the Senate bill?
yes, so in 26, it's 136 million. In 27, it's 181. In 28, it's 270. 29, 354, et cetera.
Okay, so several $billion by 2037.
Well, if you add those numbers up cumulatively, sure.
Yeah.
But this is based
Okay,
on,
all
yeah,
right, thank
current
you.
law and
Okay,
this.
okay, final question, Senator Carrozza.
Mine's at just a top level. I just wanted to know if you could give us the overall savings for the governor's plan, the House plan, and the Senate as, at this point.
So that's what this chart is.
No, but I mean, is there a top number?
What do you
Like,
mean by top?
it's been interpreted that the Senate is coming across as saving half of what the governor initially proposed.
Roughly, yep.
And as far as the bottom, I mean, I see the chart, but the bottom line, is that the correct interpretation of number? I'm just, as far as, in other words, if there's other recommendations on the policy side that could have both savings and give some flexibility to the
Right.
locals, that could add to the overall savings on the Senate side.
I mean, yes, to the extent that there's the programs that are in there. I mean, if you delete one of the programs, and that would have a savings, at least in the budget bill, because there is money for those programs in the budget bill. This chart, unless additional amendments are adopted for the actual formulas, the mathematical formulas, this chart represents the Senate plan.
Okay.
Okay, Erica, thank you. Go up and do your thing in budget and tax. And folks, if you, maybe, if you have questions you still have, maybe just send an email through to Stacy. She can route it to Erica, and we can kind of get, some email responses. I think that might make sense. Okay, thank you again. Let's turn to the policy issues. And again, I'll reference Stacy's chart, starting on page 2. And again, there are, maybe 15 issues. And then we have some standalone amendments that 3 or 4 senators, I know Senator Carrozza, Senator Lewis Young, Senator Rosapep, and maybe I'm missing Senator Hester. So there's 4 senators who are proffering some amendments separate than what's on this chart that Stacy put together. So with that, and the other thing, let me just put this out there. No matter what we do here, this is going to conference because it's going to be in a different posture as the House. And so at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not saying that, at the end of the day, this is going to be subject to a lot more negotiation down the road in a conference committee between the House and Senate. So for what it's worth, I just put that for you. Yes, Senator Simon-Aron.
Would EEE have anybody on that conference committee, or is it just B&T?
I don't know
If
the.
it's joint, they would generally have one from each.
Yeah, I think we'll have probably one seat. They're the lead committee, we're second. We would have one person on the conference committee. So Sure.
So we're reviewing today, we're not voting today? Or do we have a timeline when?
Well, we can't, okay,
There's a-
because this is going to have to go back to B&T, then back over to the House, we can't sit on this thing too long, okay? And so I think what I'm going to suggest is, let's go through the charts, let's hear the amendments from our different senators, and then let's have a discussion about where we want to go from there, okay? I mean, I'm not trying to jam anything out of here. I want everybody to understand it, but I don't know all the questions. I mean, there could be, of these 15 policy calls, plus a lot of maybe not even that controversial. I want to kind of narrow it down to sort of how many issues are sort of in dispute, questions outstanding, and then we can make a decision at the end of the meeting about that. So we'll take the time we need, but candidly, I think we need to get this out of here probably by tomorrow at the latest. Otherwise, there's going to be a problem, okay? Because it's got to go back to B&T, conference committee, House, et cetera. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay, with that, I'd like to go moving on that. So Stacy, why don't you start walking us through this chart that you put together?
So if you start on page 2 of the chart, the page numbers correspond to the reprint that is in your packet that says policy amendments reprint. The amendments that Erica just walked through for B&T are not in this reprint. They are in a separate reprint for purposes of drafting and just overall administration. So if you're looking for them in there, they're not in here, okay? I emailed you a copy of the B&T amendment reprint to your laptops. So
Is there a version that has them together?
after it gets adopted.
So we won't be able to see the policy and the budget items together?
I can tell you for certain
Yeah, yeah.
that the budget ones are pretty much confined up to page 15.
Okay.
And then the policy ones, they have a few in the earlier pages, but are mostly
Yeah.
in the later pages of the bill. So it's not a substantial overlap in terms of issues that you would see.
Okay, thank you.
Just make sure everybody's got the chart from Stacy, everybody's got this policy amendments reprint document, and so let's, look at these 2 documents. Okay, Stacy.
So we'll start with the most complicated, which is community schools. And that's on, so as the governor's bill was introduced, the community schools that they could have at least, I should say, I'll say, there is a chart from the governor's office here about the total number of schools. This involves community schools and spending on central kind of services. So the bill is introduced in column number 2 there. The governor's office said at least 2 eligible schools, a local school system can expend up to 50% of funds on behalf of those schools and develop a plan in consultation with eligible schools, including allowing for the spending on central administrative costs. The House amendments said 10 eligible schools, and local school systems may spend up to 40% of funds on behalf of schools, no central administrative costs. And if they do spend on behalf of schools, they have to send each eligible community school an itemized list of services and the amount spent. The proposed Senate amendments on page 12 say 10 eligible schools or 36%. And the purpose of that, if you look at the chart, is because of smaller school districts, there is a problem where they may not even have 10 eligible schools, but if you want them to be able to spend central administrative costs, that's where the 35% comes in there. So I said 36, I meant 35%. But the Senate amendments also provide for allowing for central administrative costs and includes the House amendment of providing a school an itemized list of services and the amount spent. So it kind of splits a baby there. So there's some reporting requirement changes in the bill. The House struck some of those, and then the Senate keeps the bill ones regarding community school evaluation report submitted only to MSDE. AIB is stricken. And then MSDE transmits the final report to AIB and makes it publicly available. The House says that MSD must summarize the statewide evaluation report and then just submits it to AIB and the General Assembly. However, again, the Senate amendments kind of split that. So moving further on page 26 of your reprint, if you want to look at this, is the revisions to the definition of wraparound services, and it creates the Office of Community Schools and expanded learning time in the department. Those are on pages 26 through 28. The House revised the definition of wraparound services to include offering evidence-based in-school and in-person tutoring provided during the day, and it struck the other services defined by the Department of Guidance or Regulation, and the Senate amendments accept those House amendments. Further along, the governor's bill, as introduced, authorizes countywide community school implementation plans, requires a set of measurable goals tied to specified priorities each year, and an annual review of the implementation plan, and allows the department to withhold funds for noncompliance. The House struck the countywide community school implementation plans, required setting measurable goals for at least once every 2 years, and the review of the implementation plan at least once every 2 years, and struck the authority to withhold funds. The Senate proposed amendments keep the countywide implementation plans, adopts the House version of reviewing the plans and the goals at least once every 2 years, and keeps the fund withholding language. So that's the community school changes.
Can I ask where the fund withholding language is at? Page
31.
31, lines 7 to 11?
Page, let's see. Probably on page 31 there.
That's what I meant, 31, 96 now.
28 to 32.
Right, so I guess
The language that is on page 31, lines 7 to 11, what is that? Is that the implementation plan?
Yes,
Okay, and so that's every 2 years?
at least once every 2 years.
Okay, at least once every 2 years, rather than annually. And this language, making progress, is that part of the original bill?
Anything without underlining or strike through is part of the original bill.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Yeah, got it.
So I think I heard you mention that for the community schools, the decision was made that a summary would be provided by MSDE instead of a breakout? What?
Yes, if you flip back to page 2 of the chart there, and you look at the third row,
Page 2 of the chart.
let me see, on the second row under community schools, that's, if you look on pages 13 and 14 of your reprint, so,
Got it.
yeah, see that? Current law requires that by August 15th, 2025, and each August 15th thereafter, each community school coordinator of an eligible school shall submit to the department, and accountability board is stricken there, an evaluation that provides for the immediately preceding school year, and then it talks about all the information that must be included in that report. So the changes there are just to who gets the report at what time.
So it's not a summary? I thought what I heard you say it was going to be a summary, but each
Right.
LEA is going to provide the same data, right?
Right, and then what happens is they give it to MSDE, MSDE summarizes all those reports, and then the report gets transmitted to AIB and the MGA.
But MSDE will have the granularity. In other
Correct.
words, I'm already hearing that many of the LEAs are implementing various aspects of community schools differently
Correct.
and are thus getting different requirements. What I care about is a standard in that in my county, Prince George, is that the funds that are going to community schools are doing what they intend to do. Will we be able to see that from a per county perspective?
I think the report that gets submitted to the MGA will be a summary of that, and that if you want additional information, you can probably contact MSDE to get that
Okay,
information.
thank you.
Okay. So moving on to minimum school funding, which is starts on page 15 of your reprint. So on page 15, for minimum school funding, there is reasons why a local school system could request a waiver. And so this language adds a few additional reasons why a local school system could ask for a waiver. But I think the committee should note that that says including, which is illustrative. It is not exclusive. So these are the only reasons that a county could go and ask for a waiver from the minimum school funding provisions. Just highlight some of the topics that the stakeholders have been talking about. And so these were thought to be important to understand. Also in here is to allow counties to report expenditures in the aggregate by school versus by blueprint category bucket. That's on page 15.1 in your reprint there.
Can I ask questions about that? So I have a note here, again, on page 15, starting with the, I guess this is the per pupil funding, and does this include weights? I'm assuming, because I have a note about held harmless.
So yes, this is, again, this is fiscal, so this is not, the changes, anything is not included in here.
Right.
So this is special education, which was held harmless, meaning it's decoupled from the foundation formula, and then it grows at the rate in current statute or current law versus the change in the per pupil funding amount.
So they kept the 103%, 112, the Senate committee did that,
Yes.
kept these, okay, good.
Yes.
And then on the new section, 5-234, could you go through that? Or if it was already gone through, I can do it later.
That's what I just explained.
Right, so maybe you could do it again, so I can understand. So each county board has a minimum amount to distribute?
Correct.
And is this is a formula that is,
It's not a formula.
okay, so what is B1?
So this is the 75% follows the child
Okay,
provision.
right, and it's distributed based on the school funding amount?
The school funding amount, which the definition isn't shown, that's an A.
Okay,
And it says, for the applicable program multiplied by the school enrollment for the applicable program. So essentially, whatever the program is in there, it has to be multiplied by the enrollment of the school system.
right, so, yeah, so that's what I was thinking, it was a formula, so it's based on what A is, that's not here, though.
Right. A is just a definition of what minimum school funding is.
Okay, great.
It's not a formula.
Okay, and then what's required here, this is, again, I think the flexibility about the waiver, that schools can ask for a waiver from what?
From the minimum school funding provision.
To allow them to receive more or to distribute less?
Well, the requirement being phased in is the 75% follows the child. So for example, maybe they had contracts or procurements already for certain services, and they've spent a certain amount of money at the central office, and it can't be allocated, individually to each child. So there might be a waiver for a certain percentage of money for that purpose.
They have a contract with some type of services that are provided to all students, and so.
Correct.
You might be off a few percents or 10%.
Correct.
10%. Okay, is there a range of how much that can be?
That will be determined by the Accountability and Implementation Board.
So the AIB will
Yes.
promulgate regulations about how much the range
They
is?
have a policy that they have just adopted, and they're beginning on April 1st, they will start allowing counties to submit applications for waivers.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, Senator Watson?
clarify. So, because I see the use of the word significant, the AIB will determine what significant means based on what you said, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay?
Vice Chair Cake?
Thank you. Stacy, my questions were also in 5-406 on the waiver. So if the AIB, so first off, is it all or nothing, or could they waive a percentage rather than waive all requirements for the next fiscal
So
year?
it's going to be up to the county's application. The county is going to ask for a waiver for whatever reason, for whatever amount.
Okay.
And that will be determined at that level.
So it's not all or nothing?
Correct.
Okay, the second question is there an appeals process if the AIB rules against a county
No.
and they think that's unreasonable? They are the final arbiter?
Yes.
The first and only?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Senator Hester?
Stacy, one more on this section here. So given that there's changes happening this year, could a county request a waiver for something because of the changes happening this year? Would that fall under one of these where it says any other reason?
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, let's move ahead.
Okay. Next is the Collaborative Time Innovation Demonstration Grant. So this was included in the bill because of the pause in the collaborative time. And what it would do is it would, it's funds to establish replicable, innovative models for teacher collaboration at school or the local school system level to improve retention and student learning. There's $9 million in the budget, but it's not included in the bill. MSD would administer the grants, submission of grant proposals, diversity requirements, and it would begin on March 1st, 2026. The House struck this language because they put the collaborative time back into the bill, and the Senate made no changes because they accept the governor's proposal of the 4-year pause in the collaborative time. Basically, they put the program in sort of as some funds for the interim while the collaborative time was paused to give school systems some money so they could develop some innovative models to start working toward the collaborative time that they would like to see under the blueprint law. The House, because they struck the pause in collaborative time, they struck this program. The Senate has made no changes because they accept the governor's proposal.
Does the Senate amendment put back in the $9 million?
It does nothing. It just, we're working at two different bills. The House has House Bill 504. This is Senate Bill 429. So we're not striking anything from the bill. It's maintaining the bill.
So it's maintained in the bill?
Correct.
Okay, Senator Croza?
So going back to this Collaborative Time Innovation Demonstration Grant, since my understanding is that there's going to be a review of the actual 60-40 breakdown, and some of the local school systems have indicated that they can work some of their collaborative time that they're already working on internally. You know, with this grant now, it just seems to me that because we're actually looking at the collaborative time policy, and we have some local school systems that are already internally working on this and have other priorities when it comes to the blueprint mandates, is how much are we talking about with this grant?
The grant is $9 million in the budget.
9 million.
Correct.
That could conceivably be used for other blueprint, to meet other blueprint requirements.
It's in the budget for this program.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Hester, you had another question? Or
No.
your light's on? Okay. Okay. Senator Washington?
A question. Right. Yeah, I have a note. What are the school systems that are already doing it going to learn? So in the model, so the House struck the whole 6-123. And I think I wanted to ask a question about technical assistance. So in our version, it would be on page 16 in line 28, where there's a approved vendor who would, and that the department, the MDE, yes, MDE is running this grant program, and they can hire an outside vendor to implement the grant program? Is that what this?
No, MSD administers
help
the
me.
grants. So
Okay.
the school systems who are asking for the grant money for the purposes of the program, they would
Got it.
probably do all of the hiring of the vendors and
Okay, so the locals. And the, approved by the department, so the department would give a list, or just any other use? Is that what that means, any other use by the department for this grant program? Is literacy or anything like that being used for this innovative models and literacy, or?
I don't understand your question.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, seeing no further questions, Stacy?
Okay, the next, beginning on page 18, is the school leadership training program. There's two parts, the school system leadership training program and the Maryland School Leadership Academy. The House struck this program from the bill, and the Senate kept this program. So the blueprint already included a requirement to have a school leadership training program. This just, and there was a bill that was passed last year that made some minor changes to how that would be, how it would be conducted. It's a bifurcated program because it's talking about two different levels of leadership training. There is a leadership at administrative level, a board member level, superintendent level, and then there's one for principals and school leadership in that way. So that is what that's doing. It's essentially, there was a finding or a determination that principals really need some additional training and to make them better. So this is furthering that purpose. There's no, I don't know if there's money. Right, so this was already a blueprint requirement, so I don't know if there's additional money in the budget for it or not. I just don't know. Mike Thomas is here from the governor's office if he knows.
Okay, Mr. Tom? Yeah, actually, since you're here, why don't you just come up in case some questions pop up? I think that'd be helpful. I didn't realize you were behind the podium there. Senator Washington?
That's perfect, thank you so much. So I have a note that says this is it was a $6.3 million, and it was reduced, 6.3, and it was reduced to 3, this school leadership training program?
Correct, that's what House Appropriations did.
Okay, so-
In our original version that we introduced, there's $5 million already included in the budget under current law.
Right.
We added 1.25.
Actually, since we're streaming, let's go back. You got to introduce yourself and who the heck are you, kind of thing.
Right. For the record, my name is Mike Thomas. I'm Deputy Legislative Officer for the Governor.
Great.
Under current law, there's $5 million built into the budget for this program. Because we're adding these additional requirements, we added an additional $1.25 million. So it's $5 million over 4 years to FY '29. So that would be a total spend of $6.25 million.
And then,
Correct. For the total program.
and then to, the House version reduced it to 3 million?
3 or 3.6.
Okay. And you're saying that this is a program that's already required under law?
Correct. After seeing some of the implementation challenges of the program, we wanted to make changes to make it more specific to principals because we feel like they can have the best supports necessary.
But there was money already allocated for this program?
Correct.
Okay, so it already exists in law somewhere else?
Under this section
The
that we're amending.
requirement?
Yes.
Okay. And it's this section here where it's the following individual shall complete system leadership training? That's that, okay. And so the House version strikes that?
Correct. They struck the changes that we had proposed.
Okay. Because striking it doesn't change anything, there's still a requirement.
Correct.
Right. And where's the money for this requirement currently being allocated? Is it through MSDE's budget, or how is it?
from MST's budget, it's all from the Blueprint Fund itself. I believe it's a joint program administered by MSTE and AIB. I don't know where exactly the money lies.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Kagan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike, thanks for all your work on this. Anticipating the conference committee, I'm looking on page 3 of the chart, and
don't think he
I'm
has it.
looking
You
at the
don't, do you?
bill on page 21.
He doesn't have it.
He doesn't have the chart. Okay, the governor kept the training program, the House killed it, the Senate goes with the governor. I'm looking at the bill. Do you have the bill in front of you?
I have the reprint from
Okay,
EEE.
yes. Page 21, numbers 3 and 4 at the top of that page. It seems to me that we want our principals and our assistant principals to have training opportunities. I'm wondering if we're looking to cut the baby in half, whether we could possibly save money by taking out other county board leaders and other people that could possibly benefit, but really keep the focus on our principals and assistant principals.
So here what we're trying to do is that we were trying to get at individuals who are teachers or other school leaders that are kind of currently in the building itself, but maybe like on the teacher career track that may be thinking about jumping into the administrative track. So that's how we're trying to challenge those individuals to go through the program. But we're maintaining the other separate program for individuals who are county board leaders or superintendents. This is more meant for people who are, before they go out and get the master's degree, which is typically required, to think about doing this program instead, just to see if it's something they want to do.
What I'm hearing you say is that you really want this. What I'm seeing is that the House struck the whole program. I'm proposing the concept of half a win here for the governor and the House, which is save the money and really focus on the people who we want the most to have that kind of training opportunity, which would be current principals and assistant principals.
Senator Kagan, I
Please,
asked the
Stacey.
House about that. and
Yeah.
Apparently, they prefer the version that was passed out of the legislature last year, the structure of the program. That's the only reason that they struck it from the bill.
So they're not killing the program.
No.
They're sticking with incumbent legislation.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Stacey.
Okay, Senator Watson?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is on page 18 of the bill where it talks about the school leadership training programs and the two components. I don't have any problem with the school system leadership training, but the Maryland School Leadership Academy, one of the criteria says it's going to review education in the United States relative to countries with top-performing education systems and the implications of high performance for students, the economic security of the United States, and quality of life. I just do not see that that is in the scope of the group of folks who are intended to go to this. It seems like to me that that should be something that we should get for free without having to pay for from the National School Board Association. I would love to understand why our folks are going to look worldwide, and cast that broad net in trying to look at different policies in different countries and all of that.
Is that that's existing law, and that was passed under the blueprint under Chapter 36 in 2021. And the thought being is that these school leaders at school board level and superintendents, you're looking outside of just the United States to find best practices in leadership in education. That was the point of that.
Well, have someone who's gone outside of the country, which you'll find mostly, especially in European countries, that everything is free. All of our education is free, as well as a couple other things. But it just seems like this should be a state board initiative and a National School Board Association, of which many, many across the country school boards are a member of. I think we could save a lot of money by using what already exists versus trying to create a new program, of which there's a stipend that's going to be paid to these participants. And I'm assuming they're going to have to travel across the country to.
So the theory being that there could be some synchronous because it's supposed to be done in a cohort-based system. So it would be some synchronous, some asynchronous over a certain period of time. So no, it generally wouldn't be a lot of travel. I think they work in cohorts so that people could meet each other and talk about issues that are important to people at that level. That's the theory behind it.
Okay, I have a lot of comments about this, but I'll save them for another time. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay. The National Teacher Recruitment Campaign, that begins on page 22 of your reprint. The purpose being an incentives to bring more licensed and prospective teachers to the state. The House made no changes and the Senate made no changes. Going next is the Maryland Teacher Relocation Incentive Grant. I don't know.
Here, put your mic on, because we're,
2.5 million over 4 years.
Sarah, Washington, you had a,
Yeah, I have a
hey
question.
guys, the one thing is, since we're streaming, if you're asking questions, you put the mic on, because
Yeah.
nobody will hear you back home, so, okay, Senator Gallion, did you have a question? You had a question? You want to put your mic on, then we'll go to Senator Washington.
Sure, when he said the 2.5, I was seeing if that was per year, or he said it was over the entire 4-year period, so he answered that, but the mic wasn't on, so. Yeah.
Senator Washington.
So, thank you. So the campaign, it looks like it would begin in July, and it's an external vendor, so page 23, B through 5. I guess, Kelly, one of the things I wondered is one of the major problems that has been expressed to us is that we have 6,000 teachers that are not fully certified, so that are already here. Was there any contemplation in the House or any discussion about focusing this campaign on people who currently are teaching in our schools and who, where we don't know exactly why they're not getting certified? Was there any discussion or
That's what the Grow Your
consideration?
Own Educators Grant Program is focused on.
That is correct. So could we pause or just see what that would?
That's coming up just a little bit later in
Okay,
the,
so I'm interested in striking that whole section because I'd be interested in us focusing on the programs that we currently have, and to the other point of not creating new ones and also not replicating in our bill things that already exist elsewhere. There's just a lot of content here, and if it's $3 million over a couple years, that's not a lot of money. So the question is, what are you actually doing? But altogether, these little pieces of money, could be the difference between 20% for community schools, 40% community schools, and maybe 35 or 30%. So that's just my overall thinking, colleagues, about, all of these new programs that already exist and should be funded elsewhere. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Stacy?
so the next program on the list is the Maryland Teacher Relocation Incentive Grant. As introduced, the bill would provide $2,000 incentive grant with a 2-year work commitment to incentivize teachers to move to the state and teach in the state of Maryland. There were various conditions on the grant, including they had to provide itemization, because the money would be used to help them move and all those types of expenses. The House made some changes to change the focus to incentivize teachers to come to Maryland instead of a reimbursement to partially offset the cost of the move, and the Senate agreed with those House amendments.
About other programs that we're currently operating. So, for example, AmeriCorps, do we have data on the average length of time individuals that are provided these incentives, how long they actually stay in the state and continue to teach?
I wouldn't have that for AmeriCorps off the top of my
Well, I
head.
know for AmeriCorps, it's kind of short, that they do the 2 years, and then, you have a few that stay on, but for the most part, they do the 2 years, get all the incentives, and then go and do something else. So I'd be interested in that, because I'd be concerned about us recreating, giving somebody $2,000 with only a 2-year commitment, and knowing that other types of programs like that did not create the kind of sustainable participation in the system, in contrast to teachers maybe that are conditionally certified. They're already here. They've been here for 2 or 3, 4 years. They already have a residence here. And what would $2,000 look like to them to complete their?
I will note the House did change the service commitment to 3 years from 2 years.
Vice Chair Kagan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wonder, we have 3 pages left, just 3 pages, not even 3 full pages of Stacy's overview. I wonder what colleagues think or what the chair thinks about going through the whole thing to paint the big picture, and then we can go back and ask any detailed questions. But I'd love to get to paint the whole picture.
I think we got to go to the end, and then people kind of lose their train of thought. I mean, when they're in the moment, you just explained it. I think
Okay.
it's a little bit
Okay.
more efficient. People
Okay.
kind of know. Okay, so let's, any other questions on this? And then otherwise, let's go, Stacy, next item.
Okay, the career ladder collaboration time. As introduced in the bill, it paused the start of the 8-year phase-in to begin in July 29 from the current law, which was July 25. The House pushed back the 8-year phase-in to begin in 26 versus 25. The Senate agrees with the bill as introduced. Moving on to the Academic Excellence Program. So this is the program introduced by the governor. This essentially would require teacher coaching and professional development support program. It would be administered at the MSDE level. A local school system could elect to participate. For fiscal years 26 and 27, the focus of the program would be on elementary schools and literacy, and it adds a special fund. Those are on pages 31 and 34. The House, they essentially moved it in the statute from Title 9 to Title 6, Subtitle 11, and they beefed up the program in terms of some of the information provided by the governor's office. So the Senate essentially accepted the House amendments with some minor changes in the language. Okay.
Senator Washington.
All right, so I just want to ask for the purpose of the fund. So are the funds for this fund coming out of the blueprint blueprint funds, or are these funds from a different source?
There are some funds that would come out of the Blueprint Fund. That's what
Right.
we've requested. The reason we're also requesting establishing the fund, MSDE believes that they can get private donations for this. And so that would allow them to be able to accept those private donations and then use those dollars to supplement what we can get through the Blueprint Fund.
And then how much is this excellent?
The first year would be $17 million. It would jump to, like, over the course of 4 years, I think it'd be about like in the 50s by the time that ends. So it goes from 50 coaches per year to 200 coaches per year by year 4.
So MSDE would have a core of coaches that they send out? Is that the idea?
Yes, to help us supplement what's going on in the local school districts right now.
And so MSDE currently has an initiative around, literacy. And how is that funded currently, the MSDE program?
We don't have, this is a new program. I would have to get back to you on the existing literacy programs.
So this is a MSDE departmental initiative being funded for dollars that could be going into the classroom, I guess, is what I'm.
So these coaches would live and work in the classroom every day. So they would not be sitting at MSDE. These coaches would be sitting there working directly with individual teachers in schools. And that'd be the purpose, to make sure that they can supplement what's going on, that they are not kind of on the career track, on the career ladder. These are individuals whose full job is to support individuals in the classroom.
And just to clarify, how many schools do we have in the whole system?
1,800.
So we have 1,800 schools, and there will be 200 people helping out with how many teachers do we have in the system? I guess, again, I'm trying to understand, because that's a big chunk of money,
So the design of the program would be coaches would be responsible for 2 to 4 schools within a region. And there would be particular coaches that would work with educators. They would identify the schools that need the most support. They would identify the educators in the schools that need the most support and provide them with individualized coaching and targeted professional development. That's the goal. And they would work with regional coordinators, and regional coordinators would, again, work with local school systems. If the school system elects to participate, it's not mandatory. They would have to sign up and say, yes, I would like to receive this coaching.
I guess I'm understanding that, but the whole system is, these are dollars that were not previously budgeted, right? This would be new money?
Correct.
This is new money spending, and in 4 years, it'll be 50 million, and then this year, it's 17 million.
Correct.
Okay, so are there, and MSDE currently has an initiative that's funded not from these dollars around literacy and training. Aren't there other initiatives?
They have had some
Right,
nonprofit
right,
dollars come in.
Right,
I think it's in
right,
like the
right,
$9 to $10 million range.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Let's go in the order, Senator Carrozza, Senator Gallion, and then Senator Heston.
Thank you. I was going back to just making sure I understood the numbers. The Maryland Teacher Relocation Incentive Grant, was that, what was that number?
$2,000 maximum award.
But it's an overall grant program?
Correct. It'd be about approximately $3 million over 4 years.
Okay. And that, right now, that would be a new program?
Correct.
Okay. And that would be, as proposed, would be paid for with Blueprint dollars? Okay. And then the career ladder collaboration time that Senator Washington was just asking questions on the numbers. Is this, this is the program where there's a collaboration between MSDE and the Workforce Alliances?
No.
Is that, or is that separate?
That's career counseling.
Okay, so okay, that's not here.
That's not that.
So this program, Career Ladder Collaboration Time, is this a new program?
No, that's the pause, that's in the blueprint. The collaboration time money is built into the foundation formula. That is why when we're putting a pause for 4 years on the start of the 8-year phase-in, that is why they took the money, they decreased the small amount in the per pupil amount because they're pausing the collaborative time. The collaborative time is taking the teaching percentage from 80% down to 60% of the time so that teachers can work together to improve teaching, have more planning time, et cetera.
Okay, so this goes back to the point I had raised earlier when, as I understand it, part of the pause or the would be to review the policy. The savings for the, so are we saying then that the savings for the pause would be what?
That's what Erica explained when she was.
Okay, but I guess what I'm trying to understand is the numbers that you just mentioned, the 17 million and then the 50 million over 4 years. I'm trying to better understand those numbers.
Sure. As the governor's office has looked, pausing collaborative time for 4 years, just collaborative time, not the per pupil foundation, not the at-risk populations, that would be approximately 759 million over 4 years. That'd be the state share.
Okay.
Okay, Senator Gallion, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just kind of looking through this. Everybody knows what our budget issues are. I just have a real issue with any kind of new programs at this point when, we just passed a blueprint, 4 or 5 years ago. So just for example, the academic excellence program we've just been talking about, it's going to be between 17 and then up to $50 million a year for coaches.
Correct.
It just seems to me like, I'm worried that some of this is going to come at the expense of some of our LEA cuts. I mean, I know we have a nice chart here, but I've been just trying to mark which things are new. I just have a real concern about funding new things when we're already way behind budget-wise on what was already in law 5 years ago. So I guess the question would be, just using that as an example, these coaches, wouldn't our money be better spent making sure that we help out at the local level with the issues they're seeing, with the cuts that they're going to be getting, instead of a new part of our education plan that's going to spend $17 to $50 million a year on a new program?
We would argue that we aren't seeing the results that we really need to get at for literacy initiatives. I think our most recent NAEP scores, I think for elementary age literacy scores, we went from 40th in the country to 20th. For middle school, we're still kind of in the mid-30s. So we know that we need to do better on literacy initiatives. We also think this is in context of the blueprint itself. We can't be college or career ready by the time you complete 10th grade unless you're able to read and write. I completely understand kind of on the supporting the LEA side, and that's why we want to take the burden off the LEAs and allow the literacy coaches to support here. Some LEAs don't have coaches right now. Some LEAs have a very high percentage of coaches per teachers, and this helps to drive down that. We also feel this is a teacher recruitment effort, teacher retention effort. If you feel supported in the classroom with having a one-on-one personalized coach, that can really help you feel supported in the classroom.
How's that tie in with like the para-educators that we already have in a lot of classrooms?
These individuals would be fully licensed teachers, where your paraeducator is not a licensed teacher that could be kind of leading the classroom in front of the. They're not the teacher of record.
Right, but they're helping out. Well, our teachers. I know in my daughter's school how big an impact they have helping. Okay, we might just have a difference of opinion on this one, honestly, but to me, it's a concern whenever you're building up something new when we can't pay for what we've already put into law. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to Senator Hester and then back to Senator Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think I share some of the concerns that the senator just raised about the fiscal implications of $17 to $50 million new. But in addition to that, I had 3 other questions about this program. First of all, do we know if the locals already have coaches? Secondly, if these coaches have to be licensed, fully licensed teachers, aren't we going to cannibalize our existing teachers where we already have a shortage? And third, my recollection of the AIB was that there was going to be some kind of like strike team that went in and did this. And so can you answer any of those 3 questions?
Sure, can answer them all. The first one, yes. The MSD, LEA submitted this information to MSD last fall, so we can give you like an LEA by LEA analysis as to what the number of coaches is, what ratio is between the number of coaches versus teachers in the classroom. We recognize that this would pull some teachers from classrooms, so we do recognize that. And then the last piece, could you explain the last question again? I'm sorry.
My recollection of the blueprint was that the AIB had like a strike team that was going to go in and help, and that was made up of like representatives from all the classrooms that were kind of going to do something like this, and those would be volunteers but not necessarily paid. I don't know.
No, you're talking about expert review teams?
Yeah.
Expert review teams, they are paid. They are not volunteers, and their goal was to go into the school, determine at different levels. A certain percent had to be the lowest performing schools, a certain percent had to be the highest performing schools, and then we're looking for best practices and determine where the team thinks that they could improve their practices within the entire school. It wasn't, and sometimes the focus is on literacy, and sometimes the focus has been on math. So they are still out there, and they are actually performing that work. But they're not coaches. They're not one-on-one going down to a teacher and saying, okay, I've watched you. Let's talk about your pedagogy here and how you can improve your instruction in the classroom. Again, like the professionals he's talking about, they're not licensed teachers who are helping them get better at their craft. They're helping them out in the classroom to do the things that need to be done. But this is very one-on-one. As conceived by the governor's office, this is a one-on-one improving the instructional content in classrooms by giving them direct support.
Okay. I understand the program better now. It seems like this could be paused or slowed down as well, in my humble opinion. Mr. Chair, I mean, my big concern is what this is actually going to do to the LEAs. And I mean, Erica wasn't able to answer that question because that fiscal note hasn't come out yet. At some point, I mean, I think that both Mako and Pazam are in the room and they could give us a little better detail. I mean, I was on the phone with my school superintendent. He's really concerned about the changes to the funding formula and how that's going to impact next school year and the increased size of our classroom. And so like, I think that's where our focus should be, is trying to preserve as much of the funding formula as possible.
Okay, so what, on that, let's go through the rest of the amendments and then some of the amendments, and then at the end, I think we'll have time. Maybe we'll get maybe Mako or Sam up here maybe to give, if they've got some information that's relevant to Senator. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, Senator Washington.
So in the beginning, because you mentioned this, it's a combination of funding, blueprint funding, being new spending taken out of existing blueprint and to this program to the tune of, so this fiscal year it'd be 17 million, next fiscal year.
I don't have the,
Okay,
I don't have the information
but in
offhand,
4
but
years.
I can get you that information.
So by 2030, it's 50 million a year forever, okay. And so on page 4 of the bill, there's a reference to interests earned by the Academic Excellence Fund. So that would be page 4, line 17 and 18. Is that a question about that? So this fund would earn interest, and then that interest would be, yeah, where does that interest, where is that?
Sure. Under the governor's original proposed bill, we had that interest going back to the blueprint fund. I believe the reprint.
It says the same thing.
Yeah, I didn't think there was a change. So we're going to earn interest off of the state fund. We're going to earn interest on money that we've taken out of the we take 50 million a year out of the blueprint fund, Maryland's blueprint fund, and then we put the interest of that fund back into the fund?
It's our intention to spend the dollars down so it doesn't earn interest. To go to the
Oh,
annualize those
so
dollars
that's
every year.
just you don't need that, because the idea
It's just when you
is that there
establish a
won't be
fund, this is kind of a
anything.
common practice.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, Stacy, let's go back to you.
Okay. Next is the Grow Your Own Educators Grant Program. This was established in law under the governor's bill, I think a couple years ago. So essentially, the program is collaboratives that offer teacher licensure programs with an experiential learning emphasis. You'll find this on pages 34 to 40 of your reprint there. The House amendments just alter definitions. They make some very minor changes, and the candidates must meet all their conditions, not just one, as introduced in the governor's bill. The Senate accepted those minor amendments. On page 35 to 37, the changes, the governor's bill had these collaborative plans must include school-based full and part-time positions for teacher candidates. It strikes the partnership with a mandatory partnership with an institution of higher education. It requires a mentor-teacher provisions. It must be a systemic program of experiential learning resulting if there is higher education credits to be earned, they must be credited. And there's a designation of a program administrator from the local school system. And it requires the collaborative plan to include recruitment initiatives with specified targets. The House made some minor changes here. The mentor teacher must be regularly employed by the local school system for the entirety of the program and strikes the recruitment initiative provisions. The Senate accepted those House amendments. And finally, the governor's bill said consultation with a national nonprofit entity with experience increasing the number of teachers. The House amendments strike provisions regarding the awarding of grants beginning on January 1, 26, and any awards to institutions of higher educations. It strikes language requiring MSDE in collaboration with the Department of Labor to provide technical assistance to the collaborative, and authorizes a teacher candidate to serve as a daily substitute teacher under specified circumstances that essentially are laid out by a local school system. The Senate proposed amendments accept those House amendments.
Yes, Vice Chair Kagan?
Apparently, the live stream is still not working, so I just wanted to announce that wonderful Lemoria Stanton has sent out a link, and if anyone is interested or has been texting with someone, they call the main committee number at 410-841-3661. They can give the link. I can also read it briefly, but it's MGA live streams .maryland.gov/ it's long, web rtcappee-streams.html. So that's really long. You might want to just call the committee or find it on YouTube. There is the access. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, with that, back, you were, I think, in mid-sentence, or what? Okay, keep going.
The next box. Sorry, Lemoria. Thank you. The initial teacher credentialing, essentially, the governor's bill adds the Interstate Teacher Mobility Compact. What this provision on page 42 does is exempts credentialed teachers from another state or who are licensed through the compact from certain exam and experience requirements. The House strikes the entire Interstate Teacher Mobility Compact from the bill, so they also struck that provision, but the Senate made no changes and keeps those provisions in the bill. Okay. So the special education funding study, this is a contract with an independent entity to conduct a study for certain funding for special education in the state. You can find that on pages 62 and 63 of the reprint. The House made no changes. The Senate made some slight changes. It requires a review of a previous MGA report on this very issue in 2019, and it strikes certain language in there that they thought was that we thought was duplicative.
Okay, Senator Washington?
Thank you. Thank you for this. And again, I appreciate us really going through, because I went through the first time, and it's good to see what's getting struck. So the state board is contracting with an independent public or a private entity. I guess Towson, a couple of other, I guess, local universities understood are doing some of this work. Do we have any current contracts with our state universities to do any research? And
I'm sure that there are, I don't know. off the
so
top
if
of
you
my head.
could, well, I do know that particularly the part of the bill that, and I don't know if that stayed in, where we were outsourcing analysis of the community schools. I do know that Towson, I believe, currently has that contract or some other. So could you provide us with places where our current universities, state universities, have contracts with the school system, and where in this legislation we're taking away those contracts and giving it to an out-of-state or private entity to do the work? I'd like to know that. Thank you.
So this requires to be competitively bid. So you put out the bid, and then somebody has to come in and make that choice.
We're opening up, I'm just wanting to know the impact of, a lot of our universities are already losing contracts. We have universities that are doing work, and then now we're, taking that work away, potentially.
Okay, let's get Senator Augustine get involved here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for going through all of this. Stacy, I'm trying to just go through the MSDE sort of like original letter of information that they've submitted, which presumably walks through what the governor sort of has said. One, do we think that those two things are in full alignment?
I think you might need to be more specific.
Well, we're being asked to obviously assess a lot here. And the first part that I'm just asking is that whether or not the governor's proposal dovetails with what MSDE said as their recommendations. It was fairly clear in the joint meeting that we had that the AIB did not. So I already have that answer on portions that I heard where they were not in agreement with what was put forward. I'm just trying to figure out is MSDE in a similar posture to what the governor put forward? And if you don't, I'm asking the question and maybe,
Well, they were also at the hearing, so they were given the opportunity to speak. Dr. Wright came and spoke about various things. I can't speak to each portion of it. I honestly, I don't know. And they weren't consulted in exactly what the Senate amendments were. So.
the reason that I'm asking that is because there are instances in here where I'm trying to go through it where folks I've asked MSDE this before, like they're implementing things right now. Like is it working or is it not working? Now you're asking to do some new things. This was being discussed in here. What are you doing within the existing programs that we currently have to make progress forward? And so that's all I was trying to just have a clearer sort of understanding of that. And do you have an answer to that?
Sure, I can say that the MSD worked with us on putting this bill together. I know that at the hearing, they did not commit to one way or the other on the funding choices that the governor made in his bill on the savings. But this is something that we did work together with them on the Academic Excellence Program, on the School Leadership Academy. So these new policy provisions you want here, those are worked like hand in hand with MSD on what the current effectiveness of programs is, where we think we can make improvements.
Okay, so I saw some of that. So I'm reading in that where you see some of the policy things look like they are sort of working from what MSDE came with. And to your knowledge, there's not disagreement on the policy from MSDE?
Correct.
That's your understanding of it?
Yes, we work hand in hand.
Okay. AIB did they put testimony in on this? Because the other part that I had to ask, generally speaking, is that there's not updated testimony from MSDE either. So that was also part of the reason why I'm asking it that way. I haven't seen where they have sort of weighed in at this moment. And I know we got time, but I'm just suggesting that I would want to hear from them over this process on what,
Okay,
when we land somewhere.
okay. Happy to reach out, Tom.
I don't believe anybody from AIB is actually here in the
No.
room, so I'm not sure why, maybe not high priority issue for them, I guess, or is there somebody? Oh, well, I apologize.
We're not voting and et
Okay.
cetera. I was wondering if we could hear, or if I could ask, what superintendents, or if we have other representatives.
Okay, we do, but I think I said this a little earlier. I want to get through the amendments, and then I'll bring up
Oh, great.
Pazam and make,
Great,
we'll get them up here for some commentary, but I want to get through everything first. So, okay. Having some phone problem here. No, it's not that. My phone won't turn on. I am doing it. Okay, so, here, can we do this? Why don't you, okay, you're on behalf of, first of all, tell us who you are. And you heard Senator Augustine, well, tell us who you are, and then after that, you heard Senator Augustine making, some inquiry about, since the hearing that we had, AIB having any commentary on what we are looking at right now.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity. Joy Schaefer, Government Relations for the AIB. And I appreciated all your deep and thoughtful questions. So in general, anything that reduces the funding within the blueprint law, particularly for the formulas, for the foundation amount, and particularly for the at-promise students, we, of course, would like to keep those intact. They're very important. I did hear some questions about minimum funding, which I'm happy to answer. If you have specific questions about components of the changes, I'm happy to provide information on that as well, but I only saw the reprint this morning, so I really haven't had a chance to take a deep dive, and I've been trying to sort of understand and unpack all of them as you're having your discussion, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm...
Yeah.
The question that I have is, I think I was fairly clear on the AIB's position on the money. We're talking about the policies here. And so has the AIB looked at and have an opinion on the policies and particularly as what we're being, the changes and things like that have occurred?
Right. Well, I think I have to take that specific policy by policy, but, the changes to the formula are policy decisions also.
Okay.
And I know you are very cognizant of that.
Sure.
So they go hand in hand. So I'd appreciate it if if you have specific policies on specific, or questions on specific policies, I'm happy to, if I am able to weigh in on that.
Sure. I would just say that we are asked to contemplate a number of new programs and things and stuff like that. And so that's really where I was, just asking if you all had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think we appreciate the governor's thought and the state superintendent's understanding that teachers are those folks that deliver the education programs to students, and you were having a robust discussion about the academy. And I think the difference between, and I think that was articulated at the committee in your discussion, the difference between an ERT team and the folks that are in the academy are talking about is those are one-to-one coaches that would really help teachers hone and deliver instruction to meet the specific needs of specific students in their class. And that's a staff development issue, so that's the difference there. But in terms of weighing in on that, I think that, we are tasked with moving forward the blueprint as it is legislated in law. And we are wedded to those goals, and we're working very hard to make sure that those are implemented with fidelity. So I think we would have to view some of these things with a lens in terms of how that would complement or detract from our ability to do that.
Okay, so I think they're avoiding the policy call angle here and kind of taking a slightly different view of their role in the whole system. Okay, Sarah Hester, and then I wanted to finish up sort of all what we have on the table and then maybe bring up some folks. But why don't you have a question specifically for AIB or for the governor's office?
I had a question specifically for AIB. Okay. So in the Senate bill that we're contemplating, there are reductions to the foundation formula, correct?
Correct.
And so if I read between the lines, what you're saying is that we should do as much of what we can with what we have in terms of implementing the blueprint with the money that we have before we start new things, which could be a good idea, but maybe not this year.
I would agree with that first part of your, it is important to focus on what the blueprint law lays out for us as our marching orders. Okay.
Stacy, why don't we take, at least on the chart, the last issue, and then we'll.
The last issue. So the last box or row on your chart is the community school study. This was not included in the original bill. This was added by the House as an amendment. It adds a requirement that MSDE conduct a study in consultation with the Maryland Center for Community Schools and Towson University to evaluate the concentration of poverty grant program and establish requirements for community school implementation plans. The proposed Senate amendments would strike specifically Towson University, instead in consultation with specific programs that require, instead of in consultation with a specific program, it would require consultation with any institution of higher education that conducts research in community schools.
Okay, Senator Washington.
Yes.
Okay, so does it say any school, any academic institution of higher education in Maryland?
Correct.
Or anyone? Okay.
It was slightly reworded because it was thought that it might create the impression that that university would have a say in the requirements that they were establishing for community schools, and that would not be acceptable to the Senate.
Okay, and that, okay, got it.
Okay, so now I'm going to walk through, we've got 4 senators who've proffered some amendments outside of this chart. And so Stacy, maybe we can go through those, just explain, or we can take some questions on those before I think we have a hard break around 3 because a lot of meetings are occurring at 3 or shortly before 3. So Stacy, why don't you go to it and
Okay. Senator Hester has offered amendment, the tag number 653723/1. This adds a temporary exemption to the section requiring that digital tools procured by school systems have equivalent access for students with disabilities. For a digital tool that uses AI to support student learning, the exemption would terminate on June 30th, 2028. No,
These are
there's a
separate.
packet of amendments that's separate from the reprint.
My documents that reference
It's not in the reprint,
it's separate.
amendment.
Sarah Washington.
a proposed amendment.
Look in the orange folder. You'll see Hester, Rosa Pep, Lewis Young, and Carosa.
I do understand that. What section of the code are these amendments? Is the Hester amendment right?
Okay, Sarah Hester, do you want some
And then
additional?
I'm still trying to find it in the packet.
okay.
I've got Lewis Young's and Rosa Pep's. And Rosa Pep, gotcha. Okay.
Sarah Hester, you want some additional commentary on
Yes.
Hester amendment?
So the Joint Committee held a hearing, the Joint Committee on Cybersecurity, IT, and Biotech held a hearing this summer. We heard from LEAs and from PZAM and from MSDE around AI in education. We found that there are a couple of pilots where they are seeing really good results in both reading and math for students who are using tutors run by, artificial intelligence. Unfortunately, fortunately, the reason those pilots are happening is because they are grants. They were given basically for the pilots, and as it stands now, no LEA can purchase an AI tutor because they're so new that they don't meet the requirements of this section of the code. And so that is why I offered the amendment, just because it is something that we can do that will support our students and our teachers, and allow it to take place while they are developing the hopefully new versions which are more accessible.
Okay.
This is a further enacted. This is being amended to the,
It would have to be added into the reprint.
okay.
Section 7109 is not otherwise contemplated in the reprint.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Stacy, let's go, how about the 2 Rosa Pep amendments?
Okay. Another one too.
Oh, okay.
Where's the other one?
I did not receive another one. That's the only one I had.
I offered 2.
Why don't you describe the second one? We'll be between now and when we meet again.
Okay, so the second amendment was back in 2021. Senator Rosa Pep and I worked with the IT affiliates of all the LEAs to ask, who are specifically charged with IT and cybersecurity for the LEAs, what they needed to help with certain things. They said at that point in time that they were not getting enough funding, particularly for cybersecurity and information technology staff. At that point in time, we added $188 per student to the funding formula for IT and other things. That money is currently was prioritized in the House for purchase of digital devices for one-on-one. A lot of the LEAs have met that. And there is a report that comes out every year that shows how they are spending this extra money on technology. What this amendment would do is it requires that like 35% of that amount of $188 per kid goes towards cybersecurity in some way, just to make sure that we are actually investing in cybersecurity at the local level. It's not always prioritized by our LEAs. The rationale is we're underinvested, and this administration has just released an executive order that basically directs the states to take more ownership of cybersecurity and other natural disasters. I have a copy of that article if anybody wants to see it, but that is basically, you know, we're kind of on our own, I think, going forward. There were some local cybersecurity grants that the Biden administration rolled out over the last 4 years. Those are now going to be gone. And hopefully, I mean, we just don't know what's happening with FEMA and CISA and other things. So this is not asking for more money. It's saying this is an allowable expense, and a certain amount of it should be spent on cybersecurity, information technology, and staff.
Okay, let's go to the two Rosa Pep amendments, just to put it out on the table. We got the two Hester amendments, two Rosa Pep amendments.
First Rosa Pep Amendment, 673927/1. This establishes a requirement in the Grow Your Own Educators grant program that MSDE prioritize collaboratives that bring together a local school system and employee organizations, and implement a registered teacher apprenticeship program administered by MSDE with a standardized curriculum that promotes on-the-job experiential learning to be leveraged across the state. So this essentially would change the trajectory of the program to one that is essentially prioritizing only apprenticeship programs.
As opposed to apprenticeship and...
Right now, they do collaboratives, and they want on-the-job training to be a part of the curriculum and the focus, but this would be specifically for registered apprenticeships.
Okay, Senator Washington?
But is this a section that the House has struck?
No.
No, this is a new amendment, not in
No,
any...
I understand. I'm just
Okay.
looking, it's adding a, way I read
Prioritization
it,
as to
yes,
who
adding a
would get the
prioritization
grant money.
to which grant program? To the
Grow Your Own
Thank you.
Educators grant
Okay, to the
program.
Grow, right. So, okay, so there's an existing grant program, and then this is adding to it. And the bill as drafted says that the grants will be awarded on a competitive basis. Am I looking at the right? Because it's adding an F. On page 39, okay, on page 39 of the bill is drafted, and these are stipulations added on to the existing Grow Your Own program. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the Grow Your Own program, in this section, it's saying that the department is consulting with a national nonprofit. If that was struck, correct, in the House version?
No.
No. Okay, I guess I want to strike it. Okay, so the Grow Your Own program now has these new criteria associated with it. You know, A, 1, 2, and 3. And then there's a requirement that the grant can go to a local school system or an institution of higher education? Is
No,
that- Yeah, I was trying to understand it.
So the grants go to collaborative established by local school systems, and then they sign these MOUs with, between the local school system, between employee organization, and Mike helped me out. I'm trying to remember. Let's see here.
Just put the mic on it.
One of the things that we would also prioritize in the governor's bill was working with institutions of higher education to help get them from either being a paraeducator or from an ESP or a conditionally licensed teacher to get them to that full degree, is working with institutions that were willing to take a tuition discount to say if I'm willing to have like a certain number of individuals go through my program, they're willing to provide a tuition discount. That's one of the reasons why we want to have the colleges with us.
But the grant money doesn't go to the IHE, the grant goes to the collaborative, which is established by this local school system. That's what I was trying to get at.
So this section 18-278-04 on page 38, This is part of the Grow Your Own program?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And the department's going, as a part of this program, is it existing law that they collaborate with a national entity or nonprofit?
No, that's new language added under the governor's bill.
Okay. All right. And that has not been recommended to be struck or anything?
Correct.
All right. Okay. So then we're adding, okay, saying that MDE can contract with a national nonprofit. Okay. And then this part that have increased, so this 1, 2, and 3, is that the criteria or the qualifications of the national nonprofit? 1, launching sustainable, implementing registered teacher apprenticeships, and 3? Okay,
Correct.
so.
Those that work with the
So
nonprofit,
this
that's
is,
what we want to do.
this is the selection of a nonprofit, okay. And then, so we're gonna contract out the Grow Your Own program. Then the second part of it says that this entity, this external entity, is going to advise the department, the MDE, on design, implementation, and evaluation of the Grow Your Own program?
Correct. to help
Is that
us.
what that's doing? Okay. And then the third is the entity is going to work directly with collaboratives. Okay, so what are the collaboratives?
It could be one of our local representative unions. It could be an LEA. It could be a grouping of those individuals. But that's who it is. It's the individuals on the ground who will be benefiting. That's who will be included within the collaborative. Essentially, the
Mr.
national nonprofit is
Washington,
providing.
is there any way, because I think we're all gonna have to leave here soon for some meeting, but can you take some of these offline with the governor's
Well,
office?
I
Or
guess
does
I'm
there have
saying
to be?
that, I'll just say in
Because I'd like to
general,
get at least
I
Stacy to explain some of the other amendments,
I
Senator.
completely understand. Part of why I'm saying it as a whole is that there is throughout this bill, policy decision, and I want us to, because where we're shifting money from LEAs and schools and local institutions, Maryland institutions, to national institutions, to entities managed by and creating sort of a bureaucracy of the state and national for our schools. And I wanted to understand it myself, if that's what I'm seeing. And so there's a
I want you
cost
to
of that.
understand it. I don't want to.
Again, I can try to, I'll work out individual questions, but these things are just really important, and they're not rhetorical. It just really is when you say that it just goes to a local school grant, and what it actually is a large national nonprofit working with MSDE to then launch some programs and do internal analysis. That's different than just a grant to an LEA to, recruit. So I just wanted to better understand that. So thank you.
That's fair. Stacy, can we just to put out on the table the Rosa Pep and Carosa amendments, and currently, then we will break. I just want people to know what the issues are.
Senator Rosa Pep's Second Amendment 493922/1. It essentially rolls in House Bill 772, the third reader version, extends the requirement that county boards provide certain funding to local workforce development boards to support career counseling program for middle and high school students through fiscal years 25 through 28. It also requires the AIB to report to the governor and the MGA on the effectiveness of career counseling program on or before January 1, 2027. The amendment itself, it beefs up a lot of what is required to be in that report. Senator Lewis Young has offered an amendment, 913029/1. This has 5 different components. First, it removes principals and assistant principals from the career ladder and repeals the administrative track of the career ladder. 2, it decreases the salary increases by half for maintenance of a national board certification. It would redefine non-classroom teacher to be a non-classroom educator for purposes of the career ladder. For purposes of pre-K funding, the definition of Tier 1 child is altered to include children with a disability and English language learners. And 5, it authorizes county boards to establish family income eligibility limits for payment of costs for a certain post-college and career readiness pathway, and prohibits imposing a cost for a student whose family income meets farm eligibility guidelines. Senator Carrozza has offered 3 different amendments. The first, 583628/1, it would decrease by half the salary increases for the maintenance of the National Board Certification. I think Senator, did you pass it around or not?
Yeah, we have it.
Okay,
I had the 2, I don't have the third.
that's fine.
Okay, we have
Thank
2
you.
of the 3, but, okay.
Yes. Senator Carrozza's second amendment, 573128/1. MSDE would be required to establish a waiver process for the requirement to meet the $60,000 minimum teacher salary requirement beginning in fiscal year 2027. And she has a third that's conceptual because we don't have the actual amendment. This would require MSDE in collaboration with AIB to convene a work group to conduct a two-part stakeholder review process for, in the first part, potential funding modifications to the blueprint to ensure long-term and short-term sustainability of the blueprint. And second, an analysis of all funding components necessary to deliver adequate and equitable education. The final report would be due September 1, 2026.
Okay, yes, Senator Carrozza, you want to add anything?
Thank you. I just wanted to speak briefly to them. I think my colleagues have heard me talk about the work of the superintendents. They put together 30-plus recommendations, and we've talked about giving a serious look at those. They are the ones on the front lines who understand both the implementation, and these amendments would address both giving some local flexibility, but also some savings. If you look at the recommendations of the superintendents, you can see the rationale for them. Just to be clear on the request for the waiver, on the salary issue, again, it's just, it would allow for a waiver request. Of course, there's no guarantee that it would be granted, but it does allow for that process. Number 2, when we're talking about making some adjustments on the maintenance of certification, again, this was in their recommendations. This would really be a measured approach to the maintenance of certification, bringing some of those numbers down. That would, again, provide some savings, but also, the relief that's needed at the local level. And the one that I think is really important, especially for our committee, is this proposal to put together this stakeholders work group and specifically have them focused on funding modifications to ensure the long-term sustainability of the blueprint. And what we envision is you would literally go down pillar by pillar, look at the mandates and the goals, and look at the actual funding of those. And we don't have that information, so we can make decisions in the future. And the second part is equally important. It's looking at all funding, not just blueprint funding. So again, these recommendations are coming from the front lines, and I think this committee should give serious consideration to their recommendations in these amendments.
Okay, with that, we're going to break, and you've got a lot in front of us, a lot of policy calls. We've got some additional amendments to talk about tomorrow. When we're done with bill hearings, we're going to continue the dialogue. Senator Gallion.
So after our discussions today, there were some concerns about the new program. Can we offer an 11th hour amendment tonight to
until we
address some
vote?
of those issues?
Bill's still out there, so
the best is to go through.
And the other thing is when we go through the list, that Stacy put out here, but be sensitive to. You're not going to put some omnibus 500-page amendment in front of us, are you? Okay. Well, keep it tight and concise, and you can discuss it tomorrow. But the other thing is, if there's stuff in here that's not super controversial, I'd like to spend the time on the things where there's, literally not consensus and, where there's dispute. Ultimately, of course, no matter what, you can vote against the bill. But in terms of just amendments, but we'll go through it and then we'll make take some votes and see where we are. So that's tomorrow. We've got some bill hearings. We've got some other vote list relatively tight, small. We've got some House bills and some cross-file bills. And then we're going to have to pivot to the energy stuff, okay? We can't sit on that either. We're, again, the heavy lifting committee here. So with that, let's adjourn. Several of us have to go to some other meetings, okay?